Hello, Dr. Montaigne here. Today I'm going to talk about some principles for integrating sources into a research project. Synthesizing sources is a really important concept. This means information gathering. Information gathering is a critical process leading to an understanding of sources, the relationships among them, and their support for your own ideas. And that's what synthesizing means, that you're reading a variety of sources, maybe on both sides of an issue, and then making them your own. And so you'll be taking handwritten notes, probably typing some notes from photocopies and printouts of sources, and downloading sources from library databases and the internet. When you do have your notes in electronic sources, in files, and on your computer, you need to back those up on a USB drive or Dropbox or some other external place apart from your own hard drive, because if you lose all of that stuff, all your hard work will have gone down the drain, and I've seen that happen to people. It's very heartbreaking. Once you have read all of your sources, taken notes on them, thought about them for a little bit, then it's time to figure out how you're going to use them as you're writing your paper. It's very important to make sure you have a lot of legitimate sources before you start on a project, sometimes before you even make a final decision about a topic. Because if you don't have legitimate sources, there's no way you can formulate an argument or a hypothesis or even present information about it. So some tools that you have for integrating sources are summary, paraphrase, and using direct quotes. Summary is when you take a passage and put it into your own words, summarizing the ideas in it. Paraphrasing is when you take a longer passage and put it in your own words, and it's much shorter. And direct quoting you already probably have some experience with. The most important point I want to get across about summarizing information from a source to help support your own ideas is that summarizing information and paraphrasing it all need to be cited in your paper. This says, caution, summaries, paraphrases, and quotations all require source citations in your paper. A summary or paraphrase without a source citation or a quotation without quotation marks is plagiarism. So you can read more about that in another source. So a lot of students realize, yes, it's obvious, I need to cite the page number or paragraph number or source where I got a direct quote. You all know that that's plagiarism, but a lot of college students don't realize that any information that you take from an outside source must be credited. And I'll show you how to do that in the next podcast. So when you summarize, you condense an extended idea or argument into a sentence or more in your own words. Summary is most useful when you want to record the gist of an author's idea without the background or supporting evidence. There's an example here. You can have a look at it. In the following one-sentence summary, Malik picks out the kernel of the author's passage and expresses it in his own words. So here we have a note on the source. This is the title of it. These are the authors and the page number that it came from. And here is the summary of this longer passage here. The next concept I want to talk about is paraphrasing. When you paraphrase, you follow a much more closely the author's original presentation, but you restate it using your own words and sentence structures. Paraphrase is most useful when you want to present or examine an author's line of reasoning, but you don't feel the original words merit direct quotation. So here is a paraphrase of that original passage. And you can see it's shorter, but it's completely different. Now, this really often trips up students because students will take the original and really just either distort the ideas or just torture it with sentence structures that make it almost impossible to read. And I understand it's because you don't want to plagiarize, and I know you don't, but once you have some notes down and put it in your own words, just maybe do something like say it out loud, explain the idea to somebody else so that when you actually write it down, it is coming from you, and the sentence structures are your own, but the sentence structures will make sense. So just be a little bit cautious about that. Here's an example. Source author's words. Such intuition is even making its way, albeit slowly, into scholarly circles where recognition is mounting. So here's an example. Scholars are coming to believe that, and then you can see this whole thing has been paraphrased into a shorter version. Here are some more tips. Read the material several times before you to be sure you understand it. Restate the main ideas in your own words and sentence structures. You do not have to follow the organization of the original or restate all of it. Select and restate only what you need to prove the idea that you're making. If complete sentences seem too detailed or cumbersome, use phrases, although I don't agree with that. You need to write complete sentences at all times in your research papers. Now, a lot of students are surprised to find out that direct quotation isn't the only way to integrate sources. You have summary, you have paraphrasing, which should be most of the time. Only use direct quotations when you don't think that the other ways will work. Your notes from sources may include many quotations, especially if you rely on photocopies, printouts, or downloads. Whether to use a quotation in your draft instead of a summary or a paraphrase depends on whether the source is a primary or a secondary source and on how important the exact words are. Quote extensively when you are analyzing primary sources. Primary sources are first-hand accounts such as literary works, eyewitness reports, and historical documents. The quotations will often be both the target of your analysis and the chief support for your ideas. Quote selectively when you're drawing on secondary sources. Secondary sources are reports or analyses of other sources, such as a critic's view of a poem or historian's synthesis of several eyewitness reports. Favor summaries and paraphrases over quotations for secondary sources, and put every quotation to each test in the following box. Most papers of 10 or so pages should not need more than 2 or 3 quotations that are longer than a few lines each. So if you have a direct quotation that's only 3 lines, you can integrate it into your paragraph. If it's more than that, you need to do a block quotation, and you should look up how to do block quotations, how to format those. So tests for direct quotations from secondary sources are the original author's original satisfies one of these requirements. The language is unusually vivid, bold, or inventive. The quotation cannot be paraphrased without distortion and loss of meaning. The words themselves are at issue in your interpretation. The quotation represents and emphasizes a body of opinion or the view of an important expert. The quotation emphatically reinforces your own idea. The quotation is an illustration such as a graph, diagram, or table. And the quotation is as short as possible. It includes only the material relevant to your point. It is edited to eliminate examples and other unneeded material using brackets and ellipses marks. So, those are some really important ideas for integrating sources into your research projects. Please listen to the next podcast. Thanks.